Located in the Density tab, when we have an ecosystem layer for our material, we now have a new option called Slope Influence. This feature is a density control for objects with a large amount of slope. The scene I have loaded in right now is the example scene available for this lesson, where it's just several different mountain peaks that have very steep slopes and different variations upon that. If we take a look back in the Density tab, you can see that I have a value set of 62% for the overall density. I also have decay near foreign objects off so we don't have any other influence in the scene, removing any of our instances from our density. Slope influence at a value of 100% is the equivalent of the ecosystem population you would have seen in View 6. Which means in View 6, if you were to populate a high amount of density on a very sloped region, it would reduce the amount of instances you had on that slope, and you didn't really have any overall control except setting up multiple layers and sometimes overmaxing your density. But that would of course increase the amount of instances on the flatter regions of your terrain. So I'm going to change this slope influence down to 0%. In other words, I do not want the influence of the slope on our object to affect the density of our population at all. And now we can click populate, and we went from 14,000 instances to 23,000. And now the density will remain consistent throughout the entire terrain, and you no longer need to worry about losing your density when you have areas with high amounts of slope. We can increase this value to 93% in the overall density, and I'm going to populate this, and now we have 175,000 instances, and we see almost no spacing in between our ecosystem instances. So we have a very high populated terrain, and there's currently 38 billion polygons in the scene, getting close to 39 billion. If we go back and change this option to the View 6 value, which would be 100%, and repopulate, we're going to see that value go from 175,000 down to 110,000. And if we look at the preview, we can see there are a lot of gaps in between our trees and the density of the terrain. So if we look towards the flatter regions of our terrain, we can see we have a very high amount of density, and the number we set within the overall density. Once we start reaching these high slope areas, that density is completely reduced to what looks like around 20 to 30% reduction. So you also have the ability to set this to, of course, whatever you want. We're going to set this slope influence to 55% and repopulate. And that's going to help fill in some of those areas a little bit more, but still reduce the amount of density on those sloped regions. So now we added about an extra 20,000 instances to this ecosystem. So it's a very easy feature to use and pretty straightforward, and fixes some of the control issues that we had for density in previous versions of Vue.